Hello, everyone. I'm back with another Astro-Bash interview. My name is Camille. Today we are joined by Catie Cadge. Thank you so much for joining us, Catie.
Yeah, thank you, Camille. Really nice to meet you.
Nice to
I'm
meet you as
excited.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always start this by just asking people, tell us a little bit about who you are. And if you want to, you can throw your sun, moon, and rising in there.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great way to start, right?
Yes.
Well, for me, yeah, I think like a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people into astrology, I kind of was drawn to it intuitively, like as a kid. My grandmother read charts, which was interesting. She also read tea leaves. She was Scottish. And I unfortunately, didn't have the best relationship, and my parents didn't take me to see my grandmother very much. So when I did see her, it was kind of like, ooh, it nurtured me and it fed me and all that. So I really love that sort of Celtic side of my roots and astrology. And then, like a lot of folks, I explored it over the years. I pursued a more straight, conventional academic life. And when I was in grad school and all that, I was the type that always kept an ephemeris in my
Yeah.
bedroom drawer, which for those guys that don't know, ephemeris, marks the movements of the planets. And I just used to love to read charts, but I just didn't make it a profession until I was about midlife. So I was really going through big changes, which is, of course, a long astrological story. But I started to just come out of the closet, so to speak, as an astrologer and claim my right to practice. And I been doing professional astrology since. And now I worked very closely with Stephen Forrest. He was my primary mentor. I was master certified through his apprenticeship program quite a few years back. And then I worked with Stephen writing the curriculum for our Forrest Center for evolutionary astrology. So yeah, I'm the dean of the school. So that's really exciting. And I love that. And that's a big part of who I am. You mentioned sun, moon, ascendant. So I'm a Capricorn, kind of hear that, right? The work ethic
Yes.
of Capricorn. But I'm a Gemini third house moon. So I love to teach. So I think, that's a big part of who I am, kind of a life calling, and then a Pisces ascendant. So I like to say I have a little bit of a mystic in me,
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's my journey. I'm passionate about a lot of forms of astrology, but evolutionary is my fave, and it is what I do professionally. And
Excellent.
yeah, I think that pretty much covers me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, would you mind sharing with us why evolutionary astrology, what you love about it, and the kind of impact it's had on not only you, but the people you've worked with?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I do like other forms of astrology, but evolutionary has really spoken to my heart. And I think in part, it might be good to introduce this concept I'll mention. In India, in the Hindu practice, or Hindu faith, they believe that there's an Atman, like an inner soul in us. And I see that as like a divine spark, a divine part of our soul, but it's connected somehow to the greater essence of things. And I believe very strongly that I think evolutionary astrology helps us connect with that Atman and helps us connect with the right path. Because, when push comes to shove, right, the planet is really in a state of crisis. And I think humanity is struggling. And I think there's a lot of wounded people that need help. And I don't mean that in a vain way. I mean that in a humble way. I want to be of service, but I want to help people to help align to that Atman and that divine path. And evolutionary astrology asks questions in order to do that. So, most of astrology, or at least I should say stereotypical astrology, is just purely descriptive, right? So, and I'm a Capricorn. So, oh man, I'm pragmatic, I'm a workaholic, that kind of thing. Control freak, right? But, if we ask questions, if we take a more prescriptive evolutionary role in looking at, say, a Capricorn, I'm trying to make my life into a great work. So I'm a hard worker, in that sense that I'm aspiring to something, I'm climbing the mountain. So I think evolutionary astrology can help guide people, because I think it does pose those correct questions. And I believe strongly in free will, which of course, old time astrology was so often about set prediction,
Yeah.
you will break a leg, you will
Hmm.
do this or that. Whereas evolutionary allows that inner part of us, that's our true personality, to go with also what I think, again, is that divine spark
Yeah.
driving us on the right path. The other big thing about evolutionary astrology is we believe in reincarnation.
Hmm.
And so that we believe that the souls are coming into the lifetime, into this lifetime, with a habit or feeling of what it was like, probably in multiple lives, many lives,
Hmm.
and that it's difficult to get away from that habit. Those sometimes that past life experience brings us gifts,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
but we tend to focus on the lunar nodes,
Hmm.
which and not all evolutionary astrologers do. Some bring in, I mean, they do focus on lunar, but will bring in other planetary nodes, But I'm trained again in a more Forestinian approach, and so it's more like focusing on the emotional body
Hmm.
of those previous lives. And so if we're going to help that planet again and be true, say, warriors, mystics, teachers, all the different roles we can be,
Hmm.
look at that ascendant, how do we self-actualize, right? It's like we have to kind of take a look at that habits that we're trying to at least perhaps tap into the gifts, but also come to some sort of healing with, right? And then move
Absolutely.
towards the north node. So that's how I see evolutionary in its strengths. And that's why I practice it, I think,
Yeah.
in a nutshell. Yeah, so that's what we call the chart behind the chart when we're looking
Yes, I love that saying that Stephen has. Yeah, the chart behind the chart. I love
at.
how you reiterated a kind of sentiment I've been fond of, but also hearing within these interviews, which is that evolutionary astrology, to simplify, basically is asking why instead of like telling you what. And I believe that in that self-inquiry, you can find a little bit more of your humanity rather than, in these top
Definitely.
astrology realms, it's just like, you are this and that is it, right?
Exactly, because it's sort of defeatist, right? It's
Yeah,
like, what's the point? And
yeah.
so, if it's just descriptive, it's like, what are you going to do with that? Okay, I'm stuck,
Yeah, like, what are you gonna
I'm a boring
do?
Capricorn. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like we evolve, we change. One of my images of the chart is that I like to use personally. It's not is the idea of a chart being like a symphony playing out. So often we hear a chart is like a mandala of a person's
Yeah.
life, a cosmic plan, but really it's a symphony, because if you think about it, sometimes in our life we hear more the horn section, sometimes more the violin section,
Wow.
the sun being the composer of that chart. And so it's like, how are we going to make that piece? What are we composing? The conductor, the sun, the conductor, but also composer. What are we
Yeah.
playing out, and how are we changing, and how are we growing, and how can we be our highest spiritual
Mm.
manifestation, right, in this lifetime? And that's where I think, tapping into that Atman, right? Because
Yes.
I think it helps us to actually do the role we're meant to play, be the spirit we're meant to be.
Yeah, yeah. As a musician, I love that idea. I can't wait to like apply that musical filter, that symphonic
Wait,
filter to my own chart and other people's charts. That's so beautiful.
yeah.
Well, if you have any, is there any astrological misconception while we're kind of just on this topic of like descriptive versus more proactive or prescriptive? Um, is there any astrological misconception out there that maybe haunts you the most that you want to talk about or go on record to maybe correct or just address?
Oh yeah, sure. There's actually a couple things that come to mind. I'll try to keep it short and sweet, not let my moon take over.
I also have a long
But
list, so I relate.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple that really kind of I get really frustrated with. And one is a little bit redundant, because it is this idea about, pop astrology and how
Yes.
descriptive it is and limiting it is. And of course, I think that has to take paramount, actually. But I think the other thing as well is the simple shutting down that people experience so often. It's very common for me, for instance, to be working with a client. Let's say, perhaps you have this experience as well. You work with somebody and they really want to do a synastry chart, a marriage chart between them and their partner, and the partner is already put up blocks. And
Yeah.
it's just so frustrating, I find, because I think it's basically, it's that old saying about assuming. You make an ass out of you and me. It's like assuming that there isn't a basis for astrology, or just not even at least giving it an open heart or a chance. And a Gemini moon does not like that, right? A Gemini moon is about seeing different perspectives and being open, right? And so I think that probably, I think, unfortunately, is probably the biggest hurdle for astrology, I think, because by setting up those sort of blockages, it's like it's cutting it off before it even gets a chance to grow, And luckily we are in a renaissance, and I think people are, paying attention a little bit more. And part of that, another little segue off of that, is what bothers me is when people are always trying to take a strictly scientific approach. Why is it that astrology works? It can't possibly work.
Yeah. Is it the gravity? Yeah, all that.
Right. It's like, and I really honor my fellow astrologers, my mentor, Stephen Forrest, who really try to take that bull by the horn, and they give, and then they do good jobs, arguing about the possible scientific, rationale behind astrology. But I don't think that's necessary. Like, I think, for one thing, you could just look at the history of science, and you could take something like geology, which is very interesting, the study of rocks, right? And our planet. And it's like, if you go back before you and I were born, like way back, back in, say, early 20th century, where, people couldn't imagine something like plate tectonics. They had no idea, right? That was like, even interestingly enough, you look at the shape of the continents, you could see how they could have fit together, but nobody seemed to kind of like think that was possible. And then what a revolution, right? When that door opened of like thinking that way. So why even bring science into the picture? Why do we need that when it can still be of help and service without it? The other thing that bothers me is that clearly, Carl Jung had this beautiful concept of synchronicity, right? That we're all sort of connected, that we have grace in our lives. And why not honor that grace? And for me, I believe very strongly that a lot of astrology is shared consciousness. It's just simply shared human consciousness. So like an archetypal language. And so we develop that language. At Astro-Bash, one of the topics I'm working with is Chiron, which for the listeners, if people aren't familiar with Chiron, is an asteroid. And a lot of times people go, well, how can an asteroid, that fits between New York and Boston, how can it possibly have an effect, right? But it's like we've developed the popularity around Chiron, the claiming of Chiron, the studying of Chiron in historic charts, right, has allowed us to create a vocabulary around it that is this shared consciousness. And an opening to that type of I want to say mystical belief, right? Maybe that's my Pisces ascendant, but like, or it doesn't need to be so concrete, right? In terms of why it works, in terms of the facts. And so that bothers me because, again, the blockages that people put up. And then other than that, those are the two fundamental ones. I mean, there are a lot of other little things I could think about.
Little nitpicky things.
Yeah.
That is, as a person who mirrors Gemini placements, I also find it frustrating that you wouldn't just be open and just be curious about, like, well, what if it does work? It eliminates, as you say, maybe mystical thinking, but also eliminates an element of magic when you think science needs to like prove everything. Look, some things can be a little bit mysterious. And I do believe that one day science will catch up.
And just about anybody, right? Like even the most diehard science student, right, can find a time in their life when grace operated. Like when something happened, maybe you stuck around in the town you were living, you're about to leave a town, you're giving up and you're going to go take and follow another path. But all of a sudden you remember, oh my God, I have a job interview and I set that job interview in this town. I better go. Looking at your clock. Oh my God, it's right now. I go to that job interview. Bingo, I get the job, a Jupiter moment, right? And
Yes.
then that's grace, that's synchronicity, right? And so
Yeah,
like, how are we going to like drive with that or understand that if we don't have a language to work with that and understand it better, right? So yeah, it's
absolutely.
like, yeah. So then, yeah.
I can talk a lot about that. So,
Yeah, I thought.
Oh. Well, Catie, let people know where they can find you, any offerings that you may currently have. Of course, you're speaking at Astro-Bash, so that's something, but
Yeah.
anything else that you would maybe want the viewers to know?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have my private practice, which is Cara. It's Cara Evolutionary Astrology
Mhm.
.com. And then the Forest Center. So I work with Stephen again. I'm the dean of the school. It's a great place. You can be a member where you just listen to our talks, and Stephen, is and I moderate the calls, but answer questions and things like that.
Mhm.
Or we have students that actually enroll. So those people that really feel called to becoming an astrologer. So that's the Forest Astrology Center.
Yeah.
And that's great for classes, great for just connecting with other people, finding your community, you know,
Yes. Yes.
and yeah, and let me say thank you, because I really appreciate your time,
Of
and I
course.
really appreciate Astro-Bash, and I think it's a really exciting opportunity to go to Borrego Springs again. I was there during the pandemic, writing the curriculum was
Ah, yeah,
actually,
you've been. Yeah.
and it's a wonderful place, and I
So
think it's going to
excited.
be a really exciting conference, a great time to share our evolutionary wisdom, and
Yeah.
with some great people, really
Yes.
phenomenal list. So thank you for that. And yeah, so thanks for talking with me. Any
Yeah.
other questions or anything
That
else?
is it. I just vibe with you on how excited I am about the community and the connection of it
Great.
all. And personally, as a city dweller, I'm excited to go to a place with no light pollution and
Right.
take a
Yeah.
look at the
Yeah. Let's hope that
sky.
there's no clouds
Right,
those nights,
right, right,
but
right.
because that can block it. But yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I
Ooh,
was there for the Saturn Jupiter conjunction back in 2020. And that was
yes.
right before we opened the FCA doors of our school. And it was so incredible, right?
Oh,
Ah,
magical.
the desert. The desert's wonderful.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us here. I can't wait to meet you and vibe with you in person. If you're watching this, you can come join us, have a slice of this magic that we've been speaking about. You can go to www.astro-bash.com, take a look at our other brilliant speakers, and of course, register to get your spot now to experience everything we've just spoken about. Catie, thank you so much, and I will see you there. Bye,
Sure.
everyone.
Blessings. I'll see you soon.